This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Go Blue, we missed you. So much so, we're going to have a bonus episode for you this week. It's our Big Ten basketball preview. Make sure you're looking for it tomorrow. But first, right now, the Harbaugh era is on the brink. Details why next.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Tip. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific. Throws it. Get it. Touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number. And he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, Happy New Year, and welcome as we have returned here on Michigan Podcast after a somewhat long early winter's nap. I am Steve Deace. Hopefully had a great holiday season. We are happy to be back here and talking to you again. Not happy, though, to be having this same conversation again as we head into another winter of our discontent as Michigan fans for the third year in a row. Michigan football ends the season with 2 straight losses. Now, I think there's some danger signs potentially ahead. I'm going to explain those in a second. Before I do, though, let's have some context, okay? Because Jim Harbaugh overall has done a wonderful job here at the University of Michigan. We've been ranked in the top 10 of the AP poll more times under Jim Harbaugh than we were the entire decade before he arrived. We've already had 8 players chosen in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft since Jimmy's been here. That equals the total amount drafted in the first 3 rounds from 2008 to 2014. And we might see 5 or 6 guys drafted in the first 3 rounds of this coming draft. And then Michigan has gone 10-3, 3 out of 4 seasons. The last time Michigan won double-digit games 3 times in a 4-year span was really the pinnacle of the Lloyd Carr era. 1997 through 2000. So Coach Harbaugh has rebuilt the program. He's rebuilt the brand. He's rebuilt the talent base. So the debate around here is no longer what's Michigan's floor. I mean, that was really the debate from the time between Carr and Harbaugh. The debate now becomes Michigan's ceiling. And this is now where we look at the other side of the coin. Take a look at some of these numbers. Under Coach Harbaugh, Michigan is 1-9. 1-9 against AP top 10 teams. 1-9. That's not good. 0 wins against Ohio State. 0 division titles. 1-3. 1-3 now in bowl games. Worst loss to Penn State in school history. And the worst loss to Ohio State in school history. Now, if I would have told you 4 years ago when Coach Harbaugh was hired here, those things would be on his resume, you'd have told me I'm nuts. No way those things are true. You'd have probably told me not even one of those things would be true, and I would have agreed with you. But they're all true. Now, some are excusing this. I saw Colin Cowherd recently at Fox Sports say that Coach Harbaugh doesn't have the recruiting base of the teams vying for national championships. Is that true? So I went and looked at the actual data. Check this out. Total 4- and 5-star recruits signed combined in the 2016 to 2018 classes, according to the 24/7 composite recruiting rankings. Clemson has signed 35. Michigan signed 41. How about the team we just played in the Peach Bowl? Total 5- and 4-star recruits signed combined the last 3 years, and Florida had a coaching change, by the way. Michigan 41, Florida 31. Now, I don't believe Michigan is as talented as Clemson because I think they do a better job developing their players. And I certainly don't think Michigan is as talented as Alabama, probably not as talented as Georgia. Do you think it's talented enough, though, given those numbers? Well, Steve, we lost a bunch of guys. That's part of coaching, too, player retention, right? So do you think, though, when you've recruited and you've signed 41 4- and 5-star classes, 4- and 5-star recruits, and I'm not even counting the 2015 class because Jimmy was the coach for a month before signing day, and I'm trying to be as fair as I can. All right, so do you think, though, when you're signing on average more than 10 4- and 5-star recruits a class, on average, that's your average, do you think you could be better than 1-9 against AP top 10 teams? I'm not even asking. 9-1's not realistic. I mean, if Nick Saban wins the championship on Monday night, for all the greatness he's had at Alabama, this would be only his second undefeated national championship team. It's tough to beat all these really good teams. So let's say, could they go 3-7? How about 4-6? 4-6 against AP top 10 teams is still not very good. You know, it's at least, a pulse. You're competing. How much different would Michigan be right now as a program if we were 4-6 against AP top 10 teams instead of 1-9? No, I disagree with Mr. Cowherd. I don't think it's about recruiting base at all. I think it's about coaching, particularly game day coaching. At halftime of the Peach Bowl, I ran this poll in real time. I asked my followers on Twitter, if it's going to take 28 points to win this game, do you think Harbaugh will let them try to get there? 80% of you said no. And you were right, because we came out and ran the same damn offense, the same snail's pace. At one point, it took us 4 minutes with goal to go downs, not the total drive, just the goal to go downs. We wasted 4 minutes to kick a field goal for the last offensive points we had in the game. We blocked 2 punts. I would venture that in the history of intercollegiate football, I'll throw this out there, pretty confident I'm right. It's the 149th anniversary of college football, heading into year 150. I would venture in the entire history of college football, no team has ever blocked 2 punts and still lost by 26 points. I'll bet you it's never happened. We managed to do that, though, in the Peach Bowl. We blocked 2 punts, lost by 26 points. There is a level of suck you must inflict upon yourself to accomplish a feat of that drain circling magnitude. So we are at a crossroads right now. And I think it's 2019 or nothing for Harbaugh. I do. I think he will either get us over the hump or we'll go back to the NFL. And here's why. We're not just going to be able to go like 10-3 very much longer without winning anything significant, because no one does. I mean, look at what happened to Miami. Mark Richt went from number 2 in the playoff rankings, the second to last week of the year, to a sudden retirement and a 7-6 free fall. If you look at Stanford, Jim's old team, 4 years in a row, they banged on the door. They couldn't kick it open. And now 3 out of the last 4 years, they've lost 3 games or more. Twice they lost 5 games. What happens is, you can sell hope and narrative for a while. And then the kind of recruits you need to get and stay elite, they move on. If you don't deliver the capes, you don't get the championship banners, then they move on. And they go to the new or the proven hotness. And we're kind of at that door right now. So where does Michigan go from here under Harbaugh? I think Jimmy needs to emulate a team with a similar tradition and a similar kind of head coach who's sort of our kissing cousin historically. And that's Notre Dame. You know, Brian Kelly had Notre Dame in the BCS championship game in 2012. They face planted. They lost 9 games the next 2 years. And then in 2015, he had him on the doorstep to the playoff, lost a game late to Stanford right at the end, and then went 4-8 and was on the hot seat. Why? Because people start thinking you missed your window, the door closes, people move on. You know, keep in mind, the guys that Michigan just signed in the early recruiting class have lived long enough to see Purdue beat Michigan more often than they've seen Michigan beat Ohio State in their lifespan. All right. So I get it because I'm 45 and I'm older too, but I get a chuckle when I hear Michigan fans calling Michael Spath's show in WTKA, who's going to join us in a little bit, and talk about, well, when Bo was here, when Mo was here, that was a quarter century ago. I loved Bo, still do. He finished coaching at Michigan the year I got my driver's license. Okay. I've got a senior in high school right now. That's a long time ago. I mean, even our broadcast team, God love him. And Deerdorf was great with his brutal honesty after the Peach Bowl. I really appreciate it. But does any other program in America have a radio play-by-play team who were teammates in 1970? Probably not. Okay. So the stuff we talk about, the values from back then matter, but the tactics, the strategies, none of it are applicable in this day and age. Guys, we just had 2 team captains sit out a major bowl game when they could have faced their own home state team. There's clearly, this is a different era. All right. This is it. And if you're going to tell people those who stay will be champions, then you got to be champions. Well, Steve, what about Dabo Swinney? He had to ramp up. He did ramp up. The ACC is not nearly as deep as this Big Ten is. Oh, by the way, while he was ramping up, he won a BCS bowl and 2 ACC championships. Harbaugh hasn't won any major bowls or any conference championships. So the clock is ticking even faster on him. I think he needs to follow Brian Kelly's lead. See, Brian Kelly's program took a step back when it failed to take a step ahead. And he realized, I got to reinvent myself. He was known as an offensive whiz. He was very stubborn, cleared out both coordinators. Now, I wouldn't advise clearing out Don Brown quite yet, although it's pretty obvious that the best teams have figured out how to exploit his defense, but he's got a track record. I'm willing to see if he can evolve. But Kelly gave up the ghost on offense and realized he's got to spend more time coaching his team, not coordinating the offense. I think Jim needs to do the exact same thing. It's clear. And I think he's done a great job evolving the scheme. We mixed in RPO, zone read. But when we're behind by 3 touchdowns, we call the same plays and run at the same pace as we do when we are up by 3 touchdowns. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. It's very clear we're incapable of making adjustments when we're behind. It's very clear that when we punch a team in the mouth, if they punch us back, we have no counter to that. We don't utilize our weapons. I don't know why we ran a freshman tailback between the tackles against Florida's 75-man fronts more than we targeted our receivers or our 6'8" tight end down the field. I don't understand that. And you know why I don't understand it? Because it was dumb. I don't understand it because it was dumb. Football is not a Rubik's Cube. Of course, the coaches know more than we do. All right. But this isn't, we're not splitting atoms and dropping them in fallopian tubes. It's freaking football. It's the same game you and I played when we were kids. It's the game many of us coach amongst the youth. It's just played at a better speed with better athletes and better coaches. That's why they get paid so much money. And they need to get paid money so that they make decisions like, how come we only threw the ball out of the backfield to Chris Evans 1 time, but we ran him between the tackles 9 times? Why did we do that? There are no good answers to that because it was dumb. Dumb. And it's very clear. Jim has made this obvious now. In big games, he is incapable of making the adjustments necessary to beat teams who have the talent to punch us back. Therefore, it's time to go find an offensive coordinator who can before it's too late. Wanted to say thank you to all of you that have supported us on Patreon all year long. Your support means a lot. We try to give you as much extra content as we can. You'll be getting some extra content while we're off during the holidays, in fact. And, the main thing you guys have done is you've made it possible for me to convince our producer, Aaron, to keep doing this because thanks to your support on Patreon, he got a nice little Christmas bonus this year. So thank you to all of you that are supporting us. I get asked all the time, hey, what can we do to be supportive of what you guys are putting together? We're huge fans of your podcast every week. Support us. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. And from the bottom of our cotton picking maize and blue hearts, as Bob Ufer used to say, thank you to all of you that have been supporting us throughout the past year. Merry Christmas. Go Blue. Well, now you know what I think. Let's get a second opinion. Michael Spath is my partner over at Wolverine Digest. You listen to him each weekday on WTKA in Ann Arbor. He joins us here again on Michigan Podcast. Hope you had a great holiday. Happy New Year, Michael. Go Blue. How are you, brother?
I'm good. Happy New Year to you too. Yeah, it was an interesting New Year's. Lots of college football on. Unfortunately, I'm probably like you, Steve, where when Michigan loses, it's really hard to sit back and just appreciate college football and get into the other games, just because you're kind of in a bitter place. And so there was some good football on New Year's Day, and it was entertaining, but there was no energy at our party that we were at. Like with all Michigan fans, there was no energy at the party. Probably because of Saturday's loss to Florida.
Well, especially when they lose like that. I mean, let's say it's 38-31. And, Florida takes advantage of Michigan's defense, already thinned out by players not playing. And then you had Devin Gill get hurt, Kwity Paye get hurt. And let's say it's 38-31, they score a touchdown or at the end. But we are clearly modernizing on offense. We saw some of the evolutions we wanted to see. You feel a lot differently than you probably do since you just watched an even more poorly played replay of their last loss, right?
Well, that's precisely right. And, I understand the idea that there's no such thing as a good loss. But if you go back and look at Michigan football losses over the last 4 years under the Harbaugh era, I don't know that there's been a game, Steve, where we can sit there and go like, you know what, Michigan played their best football game and they just came up short. Maybe the JT was short game in 2016 where they played, really lights out on defense for the most part until overtime. But if you go to like Iowa in 2016, I mean, it was a brain fart of a game for Michigan football, and it just drove you nuts. You look at the Florida State game that year in the bowl game, and they played like garbage for the first half. They got better, and then they had such an inexplicable way to lose it with that crazy kickoff. Last year, every game in 2017 was a terrible way to lose. Mm-hmm. They looked completely inept on the offensive side of the ball. You fast forward to this year, and someone might say, well, hell, they only lost to 7 points to Notre Dame, but they looked completely outclassed in the first half when the game was decided. They got demolished by Ohio State, and then they got embarrassed again against Florida. And I'm right there with you. I had so many objectives in this game. Okay, I wanted to see Chris Evans become a threat out of the backfield. I wanted to see the offense utilize its weapons in Donovan Peoples-Jones, Nico Collins, Zach Gentry. I wanted to see that evolution as a quarterback of Shea Patterson. I wanted to see the defense be able to showcase a few more things with some creative blitz packages, a little bit greater commitment to zone defense when teams are using man beaters. I wanted to see young players play in this game. So I had like 6 or 7 objectives, Steve, for this game. Now I understand that I'm not Jim Harbaugh and my objectives don't really count. But as a journalist watching the game, trying to check off those things, and I didn't check off a single one of my checklist items. They didn't utilize Chris Evans. They didn't utilize their offensive weapons. They didn't showcase Shea Patterson. We didn't see young players on either side of the ball. They didn't adjust with the zone defense. I mean, over and over again, I was like, can you guys do this? No, you're going to kick me in the balls instead? Okay, thanks.
That pretty much sums it up. I don't... Shea Patterson must have gotten like a 7th round grade from the NFL draft board, because to come back after what we just put on the field following 15 practices, and I will be fine. People are telling me I'm being too hard on Don Brown. I think defensive coordinators in general are gimmicky because all the rules changes always favor the offense, and they have to basically reinvent themselves or be replaced every few years. It's pretty clear the teams that recruit at our level or above it have figured out you just can't play man coverage all over the field, and they're blowing us up. That's pretty obvious. But given Brown's track record, I'm willing to give him a chance to show that he can evolve his scheme, and we'll see. Offensively, there is just simply no excuse for the lack of creativity, the lack of urgency, and the two things that were kind of the last straw for me. The last offensive drive we had, where we took nearly 4 minutes off the clock, only running goal-to-go plays. Our pace is so slow. And then the last drive of the game, we have the ball at about our 40-yard line. Well, the last drive that mattered. We have the ball at our 40-yard line. It's 3rd and long. We run a screen pass to a walk-on running back that goes nowhere, and then we punt to basically quit with still 7 or 8 minutes on the clock. I mean, that was a Brady hoax. I'm surprised we didn't call Mark D'Antonio to apologize or something. I thought that was a Brady hoax, emasculating cuck move. I just was furious when we did that. I thought that symbolically just put our nuts in the jar.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, for the group that you and I, Steve, see eye to eye for the most part, and we might be seen as overly critical of the program and Jim Harbaugh. But what I found incredible after this one was, you know, after the Ohio State game, people were like, well, look, they were ticked, but what do you expect? You're going up against one of the greatest coaches in college football, college football history in Urban Meyer. After this one, it was like, what's the excuse? Well, Dan Mullen is a Urban Meyer disciple, and so he had things figured out, and he probably talked to Meyer. It's always an excuse for this coaching staff. Why were they not put in the best position to be successful? Oh, well, this guy was hurt or that guy was hurt. How long did they know that they were not going to have Karan Higdon and Juwan Bushell-Beatty? They knew for 3-4 weeks that they weren't going to have those guys, and yet they came out the same. They had all 15 practices to work on a more of an up-tempo, more of a, play calling, getting to the, giving the quarterback an opportunity to throw shorter routes. They had all this time, and they came up with nothing. And I'll say this about Don Brown, because I understand what you're saying, that you're going to give him an opportunity. But, Steve, I wonder what your thoughts are on this. In the days leading up to the bowl game, Don Brown finally spoke. And the first words that came out of his mouth when people asked about the Ohio State game were, we made day one mistakes, things we hadn't seen in a really long time. And then a little bit later he said, but the buck stops with me, and, okay, you guys can point at me. So the first inclination that Don Brown had to talk about the Ohio State game was not to say, I failed my guys from a scheme standpoint, I failed my guys as a coach. His very first thing that he did was essentially point to execution. Well, in layman's terms, for those listening, when you point to execution, you're not pointing to the finger at yourself, you're pointing the finger at your players. You're saying your players didn't get the job done, it was their fault. So he immediately, shifts blame to the players. And I wondered a little bit about that after we saw this game on Saturday, Steve, because we saw so much of the same stuff. And I wonder if he left the Ohio State game going, I don't need to change anything. We're going to keep running the same things. I just need my players to execute better. And if that is what he came away from that Ohio State game and then did in that Florida game, that is incredibly alarming for next year.
So when you have another season that ends in a meltdown like this one, 3rd year in a row, Michigan loses ends the year with 2 straight losses. And then, you have today's social media world, and you and I are a part of it and work in it and participate as fans, and message boards and everything else. Rumors run wild. You're there in Ann Arbor. All right, so let's do an urban legend or ring of truth meter based on what you are hearing and there. Brock Heward on the broadcast on Saturday said that Don Brown got pretty emotional talking about, for lack of a better word, sort of a confrontation or argument he had with Devin Bush about his decision not to play in the game and what that meant for his entire defense. You're a leader walking away from your teammates. And that goes along with something Mark Dotson, who's been a long time insider around the Michigan program, he put up on the 24/7 board that he had heard that Harbaugh overruled the player's choice at the artist formerly known as the Football Bus to make Devin Bush the MVP when Bush decided not to play in the bowl game, and he overruled the players and put Chase Winovich there instead. How much of that do you think is a ring of truth? How much of all of that stuff do you think is urban legend?
I think there's some truth to it, Steve, and I can't speak on the exact details, but I've been told by multiple sources that there is a major blow-up between Jim Harbaugh and his coaching staff and Devin Bush. The exact timing of it, I'm not really sure. It would kind of coincide with the football bust and not choosing him to be captain. I've heard that the coaches were extremely disappointed in Devin Bush and extremely disappointed in Karan Higdon because of the fact that they were captains, because of the fact that they were great players, and that both of them chose to sit out this game. And I don't know. I mean, as you and I have discussed a little bit back and forth there, Steve, if you can't sell a championship to Michigan incoming recruits, the only thing you can really sell this point is the chance to play in the NFL. Both these guys essentially sat out for the chance to play in the NFL. I don't know how mad you can be at them if you're not delivering on the championship side of the promise here. And so, you know what? I can understand it sucks, but I would look at it like this. Again, it comes back to if you're winning, and this even goes back to the Rich Rodriguez days when people would say, well, people are grumbling and grumbling. Well, they're grumbling because they were 3-9 and then they were, 5-7. If they're winning, a lot of this stuff takes care of itself. Well, during the season, guys are willing to sacrifice because they're winning. They go out there and get their butts kicked by Ohio State, and I will tell you that from what I understand from my sources, not all the players weren't on board with the game plan on offense and defense against Ohio State. And so you go out there and you get embarrassed on national television, and now it's a lot harder to all of a sudden talk about the team, and doing things, sacrificing yourself and for the betterment of Michigan. And so, yeah, you look, is this program in trouble? Are they about to go 5-7 next year? No, but there are a little bit, some minor, cracks in the foundation here. And the longer they go without winning, the bigger those cracks are going to get, and the harder and harder it's going to be for him to go out there and, A, keep his guys around, and B, continue to get the high-level recruits that he needs to get to compete at the ultimate level.
So a series of unfortunate events led Manny Diaz to being the coach at Temple for about 14 hours and then going back home to Miami to succeed Mark Richt, which leaves that job open. We were told about a week and a half ago it was down to Manny Diaz and Don Brown to be the next head coach at Temple. Does this just automatically mean that Don Brown gets that job now? Or does Temple take a look back and say, do we really hire a defensive coordinator whose team gave up, 106 points the last two games? Is that really what we do? Right? So what are you hearing there? Urban legend or ring of truth?
I think that's more legend that he's going to go. I think that Don Brown really looked at the Temple position pretty earnestly, from what I've been told, and decided, I think that they decided they ultimately want to go with Manny Diaz, but I think that Don Brown also decided that was not the best fit for him. I don't really know what would be a great fit for him if the opportunity arises again next year, but I will tell you that his stock is down after the last two games, and so I don't know that he has a great option right now. Now, if he comes back next year and they've got a top 10 defense and they don't get demolished by Ohio State in the final regular season game, then I think he'll be a candidate again. But no, for right now, I would say Don Brown is not I would be surprised. I won't say he's not a candidate. I would be surprised if he's not back at Michigan next season.
So we've been critical of the offense, and I want to make sure we clarify this. I think for both you and I, it's the game planning, because the scheme has evolved. I mean, they ran RPO, zone read this year. If you look at Mike Sanderstill, you look at Giles Jackson, George Johnson, those are three recruits whose primary skill sets are slot players. That we don't have those kinds of players right now at Michigan. So you're not signing one of those guys, let alone three of them, unless you're going to evolve your overall scheme all the more. So this is really, and I thought you had an interesting assessment. We published this at Wolverine Digest, that the players are really given these assurances going into these games that they're opening it up, they're going to attack, they're going to be aggressive, and then one or two things goes bad, and Harbaugh essentially says, "Crap, man, run the ball up the middle 9 more times." That's kind of a simplistic description, but we're kind of seeing that on game day. So, urban legend, ring of truth, is there going to be an offensive coordinator next year, or at least some kind of passing game coordinator in place of a Pep Hamilton, for example?
Well, I feel pretty good that there's not going to be a Pep Hamilton next year, that he's going to move on, that both Michigan and Pep believe that it's a marriage that has not succeeded. From what I hear, I think it's Pep Hamilton that's been more frustrated with Michigan than Michigan frustrated with Pep Hamilton. But certainly, yeah, I look at it like something's got to give there. I think if we're waiting for the day that Jim Harbaugh names a full-fledged offensive coordinator, pulls a Brian Kelly and tells the media, look, I am relinquishing the any role within the offense. I'm giving one guy complete autonomy. I think we'll be waiting while we're in the grave here. It's just not going to happen. He's got too much invested in having a say in the offense and having a say in the play calling. This is what we're stuck with as Michigan football fans, is Jim Harbaugh meddling in the offense and essentially making it his own. So really what our hope is not necessarily that he's going to go out there and give himself an offensive coordinator, because really when you look at the people that he's brought in, with the exception here and there of like a Jim McElwain, he's hired a lot of guys that he's worked with before that are yes men. And the people that are not yes men generally have left after a year or left after 2 years because they didn't want to stick around and be part of the entourage. They wanted to have a little bit greater say. So I think the only way that this offense gets a lot better is if Jim Harbaugh looks in the mirror, looks at what's going on and says, okay, I have to evolve. I have to change things. I have to be a different type of play caller. That's Michigan's best bet, and not banking on a person coming in to save this program on the offensive side of the ball.
Finally, Michael, your biggest source of optimism heading into next season. When I say optimism, this is going to be one of the top 10 most talented rosters in college football. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about, being a really good team. We're talking about winning a championship and beating Ohio State, something that hasn't happened around here in 15 freaking years. That's what we're talking about. Your source of optimism that they could finally get over that hump next year.
Can I count Urban Meyer retiring? I mean, is that?
Yeah. I said a couple episodes, that's the biggest win Michigan football's had probably since winning the 100th version of the game in 2003. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I think, honestly, my biggest reason for optimism is the personnel coming back at the skill positions. Is Donovan Peoples-Jones, who has clearly showcased himself as, a year ago he was a freshman. He was in over his head. He wasn't quite ready. I mean, I honestly expect him, if given the opportunity, he will go out there and play like a 5-star. I think he's played really close to a 5-star when Michigan has given him the ball. The problem is that Michigan doesn't give him the ball nearly enough. I think Nico Collins is showcasing that he is legit high-end 4-star and a guy that could be a second, third-round pick in the NFL draft. I think that Nick Eubanks has shown ability to catch the football. I think Chris Evans has shown enough in his 3 years that he could be a very, very versatile player for Michigan if they would ever use him that way. I mean, really, when I look at it, even Shea Patterson, what he could be, or Dylan McCaffrey, I think when you look at the quarterback spot, when you look at the receiver spot, when you look at the running back spot, and you've got Zach Charbonnet coming in, the 5-star running back, I think when you look at the skill positions for Michigan, and you add in the defensive backs, which are counted as a skill position, Michigan's probably got the most high-end skill and depth at those positions that they have had under Jim Harbaugh, and that leads you to believe that they can utilize those particular pieces of talent and be really good. If you're going to ask me, the flip side is that they've had that talent all year and haven't properly utilized it, and I just don't know that changes in 2019.
Michael Spath, WTKA in Ann Arbor. Good to have you back on Michigan Podcast, brother. We'll talk to you next week, okay? Take care. Go Blue.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Steve.
This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, would you be disappointed if Jim Harbaugh were coaching in the NFL in 2019 instead of Michigan? 62% of you said no. Yikes. So we are heading to the crap or get off the pot year for sure, which brings us to our question of the week, which is a poll I asked you. I'm going to ask you the question of the week this time. I asked you, do you think that when Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Brian Kelly, Lincoln Riley, and Kirby Smart all retire, Michigan might finally make the college football playoff, or will there be new teams all cheating and juicing then too? 72% of you said no. I'm tired of that narrative. Tired of it. When you're recruiting 41 4- and 5-star players in 3 years, you're not failing to get to the next level because other teams are juicing or cheating. Okay, you have acquired and procured, easy for me to say, plenty of talent. You may not be Alabama, nobody is, but at the very least, you ought to be better than 1-9 against AP top 10 teams. At the very least. That's not the issue. Michigan isn't behind because of juicing and cheating. That's a fake internet narrative. And the reality is Michigan has more than enough advantages, more than enough exposure, more than enough talent, and a head coach who was 6 inches away and a power outage away from winning a Super Bowl. Okay, with a guy who's not even in the NFL any longer. This isn't about any of those other things that allegedly go on and probably do. This is about you have failed and need to learn why you keep failing, especially because it kind of looks the same way over and over and over again. Well, let us know what you think about what we think. You can follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast, all one word. We have written a lot of commentary about football and some men's basketball stuff as well on our website at Wolverine Digest, all one word, WolverineDigest.com. Check that out as well. Want to thank our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast for helping to spread the word about what we do here each week. We have a special bonus episode coming your way tomorrow. It's our Big Ten basketball preview. You don't want to miss it. Until the next time, go Blue.